Welcome back to the Charismatic Voice. So many of you have been asking for us to do some more Floor Jansen, and many of you also been asking for some more Epica and Simone Simmons. And a few of you have said, hey, why don't you just pair these two together? So today we're going to be listening to both Floor and Simone in a duet singing Stabat Mater Dolorosa. This is originally by Giovanni Pergolesi, and it is very, very well known in the classical community. I've heard it many times. It's interesting. There are around 750 versions of Stabat Mater. It's very frequently composed to, but this version is definitely the most famous. It's beautiful. And I believe that it was originally written for soprano and alto and a chamber orchestra. In this case, I read that we're supposed to have a 70-piece, I think, Hungarian orchestra and full choir as well, which is pretty awesome. So I'll give you some more information about the piece as we go along and listen to these gorgeous ladies sing. Let's get to it.
Thank you very much, everybody. I would like to invite a special guest on stage with me.
I love how much the crowd is freaking out.
Thank you. Ooh, look at that.
Wow! Okay, before the ladies start singing, I want to give you just a little bit more information about this because I think if you understand where this piece comes from, it can more deeply affect you. This piece was written during the last few weeks of Pergolesi's life. So he died from tuberculosis at age 26. He knew he was going to die, and he wrote this in a sort of frenzy right before death. So I think even in this beautiful intro, you can hear just the absolute pain and sorrow and sadness in the strings. Strings often sound, I feel, close to the human voice in the way that they're able to communicate so much emotion. I like the different kinds of vibrato that we hear on strings especially. And I'm going to go back and play this entrance one more time. I think it's such a glorious entrance. And I want you to listen to that emotion in the orchestra and realize where the composer was when he wrote this. Here. I'm fascinated by the subtle stylistic differences that I hear in how these two extraordinary women are performing compared to hearing musicians or singers that really specialize in early music. One of the things that you frequently hear is a lot less vibrato. Definitely no scooping, like absolutely none. And both of them, when they started their very first line, they scooped into it a little bit. You would also hear a little more rounding overall in the sound. Both of them are likely to pull the sound a little more bright and forward overall, which makes sense because that's where they've been singing for metal, even symphonic metal, and it has a really appealing quality to it. It feels more modern in lots of little ways, but these are just a few of the ways that you could like, oh, interesting. I don't think that one is right or wrong if they're trying to do a replica of how it might sound, if we were way back when, then we would, take a look at that styling and say, okay, you should do this and this and this. But I like that this is them bringing their voices to it and their styling. It's a lovely change, and it's very, it's like a breath of fresh air. Another thing that's interesting to me is that both of these ladies have sort of a similar weightiness in their voices. So I wouldn't say that one would stand out as definitely needing to sing the alto part. Simone sometimes has even more roundness in her lowers than Floor, and Floor often has like a tiny bit of huskiness sometimes in her lowers. So both of those qualities could lend itself to singing the low part, whereas both of these voices have really pure highs. And I think it'd be really interesting to just have them switching parts, right? It's very interesting. Sometimes this is actually performed by a countertenor and mezzo, or a countertenor and soprano. That's possible too. But there's lots of fun voice parts that can sing it. It's luckily written for lots. One of the things that makes this line so beautiful is when you have voices that do have this similarity, but they're singing notes that are side by side. So the way this is written, you have notes that are adjacent to each other. And that means that it sounds dissonant to our ear. Anytime something is directly adjacent, a half step or even a whole step adjacent to each other, it sounds very dissonant to our ears, feels painful. And then we hear sometimes resolution where one note will move away and you'll get into a third, which is much more consonant. Our ears like that better. But then we'll move and we'll get back to that side by side, and then maybe it'll resolve for a moment, then back to this side by side. When you have two voices that have this commonality with each other, that dissonance can be even more poignant. This all comes back to the lyrics of this. This was written, I think it was by a monk, I want to say in the 13th century, essentially expressing the feelings of Mary as she watched her son be crucified and imagining the pain that she was going through. So this particular movement in the Stabat Mater is just saying over and over, the mother is like the sad mother is standing, essentially. So that first line, just saying it's so, you hear the weeping and the pain in it. And I feel that Pergolesi has done such a great job of capturing that pain and weeping. Let's go back and listen a little bit more to how the voices are sometimes dissonant against each other and then have this, this commonality. This isn't the part where they're next to each other, by the way. We'll get to it. So that entire part right there where they were singing, that is a third apart. And so it sounds sad, but not as dissonant just yet. There's the third coming up. So that had some dissonance that was moving in and out. They were separated sometimes by an octave, and then I love the way they came back into essentially a parallel octave, and it was the same note name essentially, which is showing a lot of consonants at the very end of the phrase. It's a beautiful way to wrap up a phrase and very stylistic of that time. I wish, this is just a personal wish, sometimes you'll hear somebody take one of those lines and transpose it up or down an octave, and because of how both of these women's voices, how they sit, I feel like it would have been really interesting to hear them sing that totally adjacent to each other. Yeah, I think that'd be delightful. And it'd be really interesting also to hear them cross at some point. I like want to hear what that sounds like. I think that right now they're doing a beautiful job of balancing each other. And so I'm just like thinking inside like, oh, but they're so talented. What if they just switched parts? Which is difficult to do, but I think it'd be fun. I really love that you have Floor is pumping a lot of sound into that bottom area. You need to have that to balance the volume that's naturally going to come with singing a higher note. So Simone's note on top is going to be naturally louder. So Floor needs to really help support that sound, kind of give it a cushion on the bottom by pumping a little bit more volume and a lot of air into those low notes. Let's go back just a little bit. That was pretty. Some nice coordination from them there. And also I love the inner rhythmic pulse that both ladies are keeping. It's really easy in this song to get a little bit into it and become a little bit indulgent sometimes with the tempo, which classical singers, especially opera singers, might become a little guilty of. So both of these ladies sound like they're just keeping a really good inner metronome going the whole time. They're very nicely timed with the orchestra. They also are very coherent about their duet partner and where they might want to do those trills at the end. That's very stylistic of some Baroque music, especially these like little trills that they're looking at each other for. So really, really, really lovely coordination. Let's back there at this end one more time. Oh, that's pretty. I love back to back hearing them in the exact same range. That was super, super gorgeous there. So they just sang the exact same notes, and you hear that like similarity that really can happen. It makes so much sense that they would choose to duet together because of their backgrounds in classical and then in metal, and of course singing symphonic metal bands. One more time on that. That was pretty. There's that dissonance. Oh, that's glorious. The tension in here as they are singing just a step apart is like, it's so palpable. And then I love the way it resolves to unison at the end. Oof. There's that tension. Huh. That's super beautiful. A stunning performance overall. Both ladies demonstrated technical prowess, and they also had great enunciation. I loved the way that their vibrato would occasionally line up. I think that Floor's might be naturally slightly faster, and it seemed like she slowed it down a few times. And I also just loved the way that they committed to this rhythmic integrity. So they weren't relying on the orchestra to create that rhythm for them. They were really keeping it themselves. It was beautiful to hear these two voices together and that dissonance and release as well. It definitely brought the sadness that the song originally was written to portray. It brought that to the audience, I believe. It was beautiful. And I thought it was really cool to see a new approach to the song that I know very well. I highly recommend to all of you, if you're not familiar with the song, definitely go out on YouTube, listen to a bunch of performances, and then come back here and you can look for the link in the About section of this video to this particular performance without my commentary. Click on that link, watch the whole thing through, and get a feel for that slight difference in stylistic approach. I thought it was really fun. And I hope that you'll also come back and be with us on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m. Arizona time. That's when we premiere our videos, and the live chat is a really fun place to be. We're also on Patreon, and you can find me at thecharismaticvoice.com for lessons, for learning more about singing, for learning about music and appreciating music more. And you can find either below this video or at that same website our merch, which is pretty cool. So I hope I'll see you somewhere soon.